So welcome to the Node.js Community NAPI team meeting for 11th of March 2019. We'll follow our standard agenda. First of all, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share with the rest of the team? No? Okay, I'm going to share the milestone plan and we can go through that. Okay, so the first one, which is separate the additional packages on top of Node add-on API, I'd propose we move that to discuss nearer to the end of the, just because it might be a little bit longer than some of the others, if that's okay with everybody.
Yep. Yeah, works for me.
Okay, backports for TFSN, anything on that front, Gabriel, or just still waiting for them to happen?
I did some gardening on the PRs, new CIs, made sure they don't conflict, that kind of thing. But other than that, it's status quo. Both the backport and the fix for the weak callback. That's also on the backport path, and that had some conflicts, and I've been gardening on those too.
Okay, that's good. I mean, you know, Bethany's response was that, yeah, they'll be pulled in as part of doing the release, but they could land earlier if there's like lots of conflicts and stuff happening. So if you are seeing that, like if you've had to do it a couple times, you might send her a message just saying, hey, is there any chance we could land this, since I've had to update it a few times?
Well, so far it's only been once, so I'm okay.
Okay, sounds good. Focus on async worker. I think you were going to look at switching over the Mac build, or you're still doing some investigation, and we talked about like hiding the symbols in the code versus build step, right?
Actually, I've actually been working on a PR against Node.js to add this visibility hidden to add on Jippy, because it's fairly crazy. Like we have a class definition in nappy.h which includes a static method, right? This is for async worker, right? And the static method is the pointer of which you take and pass into an API so that, you know, on work complete, it calls you back, right? And then based on the error status, you decide whether to call on OK or on error of the instance of the class that was created using Node add-on API. Now, since you're taking the pointer of this function, there is no way this function can be inline, right? But the funny thing is that the function is declared as an inline, right? And for some reason on Mac, it makes a difference whether that inline keyword is there or not, because if the inline keyword is there and you compile, you know, you include nappy.h from like all the different tests, right? Like so it gets included multiple times. So actually you get like 15 of these symbols that get defined, right? But they're all defined with this inline keyword, and therefore it seems to be okay on Mac. However, if you remove the inline keyword, then all of a sudden it fails to link because every object file has the same symbol, and that's a linker error for some reason on Mac. And well, I can imagine why, because, you know, you can only have one symbol since it's going to be global for some strange reason. And so basically, you have to keep the inline keyword, because if you put the inline keyword in there, then the symbols are okay. But if you take the address, you get the same address for the symbol across shared objects, which is really weird, right? And so the only combination that'll work on Mac is keep the inline keyword so that you avoid linker failure if multiple translation units include the same function, and you have to have this visibility hidden so that in the end the symbol doesn't get exported, because only then can you have two different addresses for two different shared objects which have the same symbol. So it's weird, like just weird. And so that's why I want to float this idea of just adding it to all the add-ons, because I want to see what everybody else thinks. Like, have they run into this problem?
Okay.
Right? Because I'd like to know if this is something Node add-on API specific or not.
Right.
Because I don't know if there are many projects which include implementations of things in their header files. You know, even though they're marked as inline, it's not really inline because you're taking the pointer of it. So there's no way that function can be inline, right? So
so Is it that yeah.
Yeah,
So it's and we yeah.
okay, and you don't need, like I said, you don't need Node add-on API, right? Like
Oh yeah.
the test inside Node JIP doesn't include Node add-on API. It includes NAN, right? And that's only because Node JIP may need to support more things than Node itself. I suspect that's why they're doing things in NAN. So there's no Node add-on API in there, but the structure of the class is the same as it is in Node add-on API, in that you have a header file which declares a class, and then afterwards it declares this function as inline. So that's what we do in Node add-on API, and so that structure is the same. And basically the test asserts that the two pointers of the function whose pointer you take and pass into the engine is not the same. If they are the same, the test fails. Or obviously, if it
Right.
fails to build because of multiple symbol errors, then the test fails.
Sure.
So, to avert failure, you have to have visibility hidden on Mac. So it's keyed to like OS equal Mac.
Right. So
So
but did you say that the same code exists in NAN and they've got the visibility set to hidden, or?
no. What I mean is the add-on, the test add-on in
Mhm.
Node.js uses NAN. It doesn't use an API. It doesn't use Node add-on API. It doesn't mean anything fancy like that. It just because
Right.
it's a
Okay. Yeah.
linker issue,
Right.
right?
It's
So
not doing anything. Right.
yeah, it's not specific to us, and we'll see what people think.
Okay.
I'm especially interested in what Matteo would think about that, because he's like a avid Mac sort of user,
Right.
and you know uh, he also supported that attempt to run an API on versions of Node that didn't ship an API. So he tested that on his Mac and it worked for
Yeah.
him. So hopefully we can get him to weigh in, or anybody else, because there may be a solution I'm not seeing.
Yeah. No. That sounds like a good way to get some broader
Yeah.
feedback. So basically, your PR would be to turn on hidden for all symbols.
Yes, visibility hidden by default, and we have Node module export to
Right.
compensate for that if you really want to export a symbol from a module. But
Right.
but right now I'm starting to think twice about that, because if Mac does what it does, then that's really weird.
Right. And in general, you don't want to export modules, right?
Well, we
Or I mean,
have
you don't
Node.
want to export your symbols.
No, not by default. No, definitely not by default.
Like
Yeah.
there might be some exception cases, but like generally there's no reason to need to do that because you're doing it through the JavaScript exports anyway.
Exactly. That's right. That's how you should be doing it. Yeah, but
Yeah,
but we have Node module export for a reason. So I'm sure that there were instances
sure.
where symbols needed to be exported, and
Yeah.
that's how that came about. But yeah, so that's basically,
Okay.
I'm almost ready to submit the PR. But the
Okay.
thing is, like organizationally, I'm hoping that I'm not, hitting it off on the wrong note, because the people who look at Node.js aren't the same people who look at Node Core. I'm hoping there's enough overlap to get the right people to look
There's a
at it.
fair amount of overlap.
Okay, well that's good.
Yeah,
So,
like I
because
think like
I
Ben
mean,
Nord.
I can ping people individually,
Yeah.
but people who I guess wouldn't normally look at Node.js, but I'm hoping that people do, and the
Right.
right
Okay.
people do.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Because
Interesting. Okay.
it's my first PR against Node.js, so
Right.
that's why I'm not sure who normally
Sure.
looks at it.
Yeah, it's a subset, but a fair amount of overlap. So,
Okay, good.
like, I think Ben Nordhaus would be one who would look at that versus, and also does look at Node stuff. So,
Okay, good.
okay, so that's sort of the next step on that one. That's
Yep.
turning out to be more more fun than we thought, but okay.
Yeah, for sure.
The future breakage. Let's just open that one up and see. Again, I won't. I'm gonna ignore that. Sorry. So we won't necessarily do a walkthrough, but because we don't have a few people, let me just see if anybody's joined in case I need to promote them. So, okay. Any updates that people want to highlight on any of these?
Sorry, nothing from me.
Yeah, no, I think Jim and Nick are pushing on a number of them, and Glenn, I should follow up with Glenn just to see if he's just can't make this time or what's up there. But so yeah, anyway, I don't think anything this week. We'll skip that one. Sorry, just trying to navigate back. Okay, SQL8, so I know Jim's working on that, but any particular issues that people have raised? I went through and I did create, did land a bunch of stuff early last week. Add-on, and I opened an issue to suggest that potentially we create a new release. I think 407 is the one that we were mentioning about on Mac that Gabriel's working on. That was the only one that came to mind that I thought we might want to wait on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we need to get a resolution on this.
Yeah. Are there any others that people think we should make sure we have? I guess if so, comment on that issue and we'll add them to the list. But I'm kind of feeling it's been 3 months since our last one, and sort of once we resolve that one, we should probably go for it.
I have a quick question. There's a PR regarding the thread safe functions being added to Node add-on API. Is that being planned on being merged in for this release?
Which one is that?
442, the third one.
Okay. I think
not this one. It's one up.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, 442. Implement thread safe function call.
Right. Okay. Right.
That one.
This one, I think, still is waiting on changes, right?
Yeah, I've requested some changes there because, like, yeah, I mean, my comments are there. There's like some stuff isn't being properly asserted, I think, but there have been some changes to it. But I think my review still stands. I don't know. I'll have another look at it.
How close do you think it is?
It's pretty good, but you know, I'd rather not land it without those changes.
Right. Okay. But I mean, the question is, should we try and put it into the next release? Like, if it's within a week or two, that would make sense. If it's going to stretch out longer, then maybe the next release.
Yeah, I think maybe the next release, honestly.
Okay. So there's enough back and forth.
Nicola's waiting to be promoted.
Oh, to join? Sorry. Okay. Let me find the participants. Right. Promote. So maybe we should keep an eye on it to see how much progress is made this week. Yeah. I don't think we'd necessarily want to include it in the release if we don't have the docs, though.
Oh, that's right. Yes. That was the thing. Yeah.
So let's maybe review it next week and see where we're at. Like, it doesn't matter if the PR for the docs is in a separate issue, but we'd probably want to have that all together before we actually put it in the release.
Yes.
Okay, makes sense to me.
Okay, good. Any others that people want to point out, or let me get back to. I guess this is the list, so we can actually look at that. I guess this one, there's this. Yeah. Anyway, simple ones like that, we can probably get landed. Here, let me. I'm just going to add that into the issue because. Okay, let's see.
Michael, I tried to create JSON parse and JSON stringify without using the global object, but it's a lot of code.
Okay.
And so I won't close this PR. Maybe I will work to create a native add-on separately.
Okay.
And then because there is we need too much code, and then maintain will be difficult, I think. So
Okay.
my idea is to maintain Node.js API minimal. And we are we can leave this future.
Okay.
For now.
That sounds good. We can maybe talk a little bit more about that when we loop back to the separate additional package on top of Node add-on API.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So Nobi, if you want to close that one, yeah, go ahead. I could understand, and I think, but coming up with, we'll talk about that when we get back to the end, what our strategy should be, because it sounds like you've been thinking a bit about that as well.
I saw the code on Chakra Core and on V8, and they use some libraries to under the hood to parse the object and the string, and I found some good choices that we can use, but it's not appropriate to add on the Node API in my opinion.
Okay.
So I can write about this in the issue that you opened.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
I think it is ready. Okay, so I think in the rest of them, I looked through and none of them, they didn't seem ready to go. But if anybody has other suggestions, just tag them on there. Any other issues that people want to point out or discuss this week?
There was another PR, Node API about promise that where you commented that we need to take a choice if to insert or not in it's a PR, it's a pull request.
Yeah, PR. Okay, right. Yes. Oops.
It's
I wonder if it was
implement async promise.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Implement. Right. That one. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and here we have a lot of code.
Yep.
It's a good code, but I don't know if we want consider to create a separate things for this, or maybe maintaining Node.js API core.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question. Let me just see. So I think let's loop back here. So this separate additional package on top of Node.js API, I think that's the one. The other one that you mentioned is like, we probably need to, we've had a few cases like the ones you just pointed out where, it's additional functionality that could be useful, but it goes beyond just wrapping what's in Node add-on, like in the NAPI itself.
Yeah.
So I thought we should all sort of discuss, well, okay, do we want to put everything into Node add-on API itself, or should we have another module which like Node add-on API helpers, or just what do people think on that front?
Okay.
I mean, I guess there's pluses and minuses, right? In one case, you've got another module to support. In the other case, it's maybe a little bit cleaner. And I don't know, maybe you can promise a lower level of support on the helper side of things.
I need to think about this. in my opinion, I want to leave Node.js API more cleaner as possible, or minimal as possible, and then add helper package or to add features that wrap Node.js API functionalities. This is my.
Sorry, finish. Sorry.
No, this is my idea. So.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good, but I don't know if we need to go with a whole different package, right? Like, we could just add another header file, right, which includes nappy.h, so as to not make things unwieldy, right? Because nappy.h is getting pretty big, right? And nappy inline.h is getting even bigger as a result. So if we do add stuff that is not absolutely fundamentally wrapping an API, we could do it as another add-on, since it's all header only anyway, right? It wouldn't mean it wouldn't actually mean adding any more complexity to anybody's project, right? Other than another dependency. So they already need a tool chain if they're using Node add-on API. So this extra package isn't going to give them any more headaches. But if we add it as a second header, since we're going to be maintaining both packages anyway, right? There doesn't seem to be a difference in my mind as to whether we have another header in this package or whether we start a second package, except if in the future we intend to have sort of diverging developer community around the two. Like maybe some people don't want to maintain like the low level stuff. They just want to add functionality, or they want to debug the existing functionality, that kind of thing. So if the packages diverge in terms of who's looking at them, who's maintaining them, then it makes sense to have two packages. But if it's just us, then I think for now we can just start with another header inside this package. Like as an in-between step between having a whole new npm package and doing it all in like two files.
I guess the other differences between having multiple packages can come down to one, like if you are all in one, you force everybody to install and load the whole thing. If you've got a binary size, you can end up with more bloat and stuff like that. Now, because it's inline, that may not matter as much.
Well, actually, that's a great point that you're raising, because it's not all inline, right? Like we do, including napi.h results in symbols being added to your binary,
right?
Local or not, that's code, right? And it's not inline code. So
that's where you might want to have a separate package to say, like, if you really want the core NAPI, which is just what wraps, or Node add-on API that wraps Node NAPI, you get this package. But if you want the extras, you only get them if you include the second package. The other thing is that we could say, well, we actively maintain the core one, and the other one is just a place where we'll accept contributions, but they're not as much of a, you could set separate expectations.
Yeah, that's another
right. Whereas as soon as we put it into the core module, it's like we expect all of that to be working and of equivalent quality, right?
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Michael, there is another panelist.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. Let me find them and promote them. So I don't know, like Arunesh, Hitesh, you have any thoughts on 1, 2 modules?
And I think that we need to split the NAPI header in like we did in NAPI.
Yeah. We need to split it into the engine specific stuff and the node specific stuff. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that would make sense too.
Yeah.
Hitesh or sorry, Arunesh, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, trying to understand the motivation is that the main header file is becoming too long, or
For
big.
me, it's not that. It's that, we have like this promise contribution is a significant amount of code. So, if it adds like 20% to our code base, that means potentially 20% more to maintain. And it's not exposing any new functionality that an API provides, but providing a new way to access some of that.
And we think not everybody is going to be wanting to use it that way. I mean, it's not like an intrinsic expectation.
It's that if you could apply the same argument to why don't we add some new APIs to NAPI to provide that kind of API then.
Yeah, so that's basically what it is. Like it's basically adding functionality that may be useful, and there's good reason to add it, but perhaps not to an API itself. Or Node add-on API itself. That's the thing. So make it available, sure, but don't make it look like it's you cannot use Node add-on API without it. That kind of thing.
So how can we ensure that, or is, if somebody downloads, let's say if we go with the 2 package solution, and if somebody gets the other one, they will need this one also, right? So this will be a dependency.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just some people don't need the extra package. They're fine with just, I mean, let's not forget you can use an API directly, right? And now that we've exposed these macros for throwing errors, which is one of the most important things that Node add-on API does on top of an API. Now that we've exposed these macros, you can mix an API and Node add-on API code freely. So you can add functionality without actually having to abstract everything away and have someone maintain that abstraction. You can just mix in a few API calls if you need finer granularity, and that's it. So that's another reason why we don't need to add all the convenience classes and stuff to Node add-on API itself.
Yeah, it might kind of come down to the philosophy of, do we want to have Node add-on API strictly be a wrapper? And then, you could even think of, instead of having a separate module where we take contributions, we try and encourage a set of an ecosystem for modules built on top of Node add-on API to add in various things. So like, you could have a promises package, and you could have something else, and you could have a whole bunch of them. Now, I don't know if it needs to be that complicated, but it's kind of figuring out what we think the philosophy or the flip side is. You could just say, well, let's pack everything in there so it's just always there. And it's deciding between those.
One of the benefits of keeping it modular is that people, when they might be wanting to use this package on a resource constrained environment, they have the ability to pick and choose whatever they want, and one of the things Uber goals for an API was that we would let new engines come and plug in, and that scenario seems pretty plausible, that a resource constrained environment would need a new engine, and then have some lightweight wrappers to plug into Node.
Yeah. So I'm kind of conflicted here, and I mean I see why this is a hard problem, right? I think you're right, Michael. I think if we go down the route of we need a separate package here, we're probably heading down the path of there should be an ecosystem of modules that build on top of add-on API. Yep. I mean, we've always said that add-on API is the way for people to consume an API in a convenient manner. So that seems to indicate that async promise should be a part of it. I mean, what's holding us back really is that it's a small V team here, right? And that's why maintenance is hard. So maybe the answer is that we need to figure out a way to grow the V team, so that we can absorb more cost here. Because what I worry about is that if we have a whole ecosystem of dependent packages, then evolving Node add-on API becomes harder. And we've always said that is not the stable interface. That can be broken more easily.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Because then we would have to, yeah, no, that's a very good point, that as soon as we break it out, you then would have to figure out how to potentially update them in concert.
Yeah, that's also a good point. Yeah, so how about doing separate headers then? Because then you have like this separation of concerns, at least in your mind, right?
And yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think the separate header for sure. I'm still a little bit on the in terms of philosophy, if people just come with all sorts of contributions, can we just accept those?
Well, I mean, people are always free to start their own package, right? So, that depends on an API. If we don't accept it, that is not a death sentence for their contribution, right? They can still float it on their own, right? But then they have to accept maintenance of it. So, it doesn't prevent anybody from contributing.
Right.
And another thing about the separate headers is that, they basically, like, since we're talking about native code, each header file acts like its own package, because if you don't include the header file, if symbols do end up showing up because of an include, and if you don't perform the include, the symbols will not show up. So the binary will be lighter if you don't include it, even if they are in the same NPM package.
Yeah, and then the download size shouldn't be really significant. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm like, I still have no clear, like, I'm not 100% on either side either. The separation, I just still wonder in terms of, like, as soon as it's in the same package, you have the same expectations for support. Now, maybe that's what it should be anyway.
Yeah, I guess, right. Yes, because, like, if our inability because of our limited team size to support this, reflects badly on the core header file, which is npi.h, then we're going to be suffering the consequences of that, consequences which are unnecessary.
Right. I guess it's like, because it's how do we draw the line? It's probably easy to draw the line if we say it's basically a wrapper. Everything else is separate, right? If we don't do that, how else do we draw the line, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
Because we probably can't take, I'm sure somebody can come up with something where we'd look at it and say, that probably doesn't belong in Node add-on API itself. I mean, maybe ad hoc is good enough to figure that out, but that would be the other sort of consideration to have in the.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, like, I mean, there's helping people avoid calling an API directly, right? Which is what we're calling the wrapper, right? And then there's a repository for common patterns of usage of Node add-on API, right? So if we did go with a separate package, then, and with separate headers in that separate package, then we could avoid the whole module ecosystem aspect by just having like async promise or nappy async promise .h, and then we have the other contribution here for the async queue, for what is basically an async queue. We could have an nappy async queue.h, which are common patterns that people need, and which can be built on top of an API and Node add-on API, right? So then if we went with a separate package, I don't think, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's such a slippery slope that it's eventually going to lead to an ecosystem of like 15 different packages, all of which are interdependent. I don't think we're going to go that far, right?
Well, I was exploring whether that was the right way to go, but yeah, no, it doesn't.
You know,
we could say there's only these two. Please make your contributions to the second one.
Yeah. I don't think this will lead to a big ecosystem, you know, and yeah, if we wish to provide different guarantees for the different headers, then yeah, we may want to put them in different packages. So, but yeah, but they, you know, in the other package, the headers can proliferate if people want to.
Sorry, what are the two packages that are being proposed now?
We could make like a
Node
Node
add-on.
add-on.
Let's call it like Node add-on API and Node add-on API extras. And then Node add-on API extras is a package that lives on NPM and consists of a bunch of header files, just like an API does, or just like Node add-on API does, with the difference being that Node add-on API extras depends on Node add-on API, and may make an API calls directly from inside. Because
so who maintains extras?
We do, for now.
Yeah, but then extras.
But we reserve the right. We reserve the right by having it as a separate package to spin it off. You know.
Well, but in practice, we're not going to be able to spin it off, right? Like
no. But it may.
It's
you know, it could also be. It could also be like a. It could also be like a recruiting thing, right? Because it should be easier for people to contribute to that. We'll still keep a close eye on it, but there is in principle nothing preventing people from adding headers to it. You know, each of which provides some sort of convenience that is seeing some amount of usage. You know, the flip side of that is, you know, we need to sort of do the experimental thing that we do in NAPI, which is like, okay, prove that this is being used in more than one place, right? Before we add it to your package, which claims to do that, you know, because otherwise, you know, if you're contributing your favorite abstraction, well, that's great for you, but you don't necessarily need to contribute it upstream right away, you know. So yeah. that's sort of the flip side of being more liberal about accepting contributions.
I mean, or it could be pitched just as this is a place where people can contribute things they found useful, and it's there, you know, and we're basically providing a place for those to be, but we're not maintaining it.
Yeah. Ugh, I don't know. That's
right. I mean, that's it's like what's the right answer? What's the right level of?
Yeah. So, like, you know, do we want to commit ourselves to maintaining other people's abstractions? You know, unless they are provably useful and in fact used in many different places.
Well, that's where, yeah, like one option would be like there is not really any. It's a collection, not a maintenance thing, right?
Yeah. And I mean, at that point, what is to prevent people from just spinning their own package, right?
Right, and that's where I was going to. You know, we could have encouraged a structure where we say, you know, if you want to spin out a package, here's how you do it. We'll have a link so that people, you know, off of the main repo, so people can easily find it, and sort of like support an ecosystem as opposed to do it is the other option, right? In which case there might be a few different packages. And, you know, Node add-on API and our team's involvement is just to help people find those and promote them.
Yeah. Okay, but I think, for this to happen, though, we need to have fairly stable, like, source level interfaces in Node add-on API, and which we do for most cases.
Yeah, we haven't changed anything.
Yeah, and I mean we've I think that's pretty stable. The sort of the bleeding edge right now is like async worker and thread safe function. Those are still sort of out there, but they
still require experimental, right? Well, I guess not TFSN, but
well, async worker definitely not, right? Async worker was part of version 3.
Yep.
So yeah, those things are definitely on us to settle. But that's wrapper stuff. So yes, that's by definition on us. But then like this async queue and async promise. Yeah, I mean these things. I mean I don't know to what extent they depend on async worker. And well, I know that the async queue definitely depends on thread safe function, but I believe Philip did the calls directly to an API, if I'm not mistaken. So he doesn't depend on the other, or it doesn't depend on the other PR which implements the thread safe function wrapper. So in that sense, that async queue stuff is it goes directly to an API, but can be done with Node add-on API as well. Especially if we land thread safe function. It's just a different way of using thread safe function. So those two, I think, would be good candidates for like an extras package. And we can move them back and forth. Right. I mean, just as stuff gets folded into Node Core, so too stuff can get folded into Node add-on API eventually.
Yeah, like I think we can move them back. I'm not sure about forth.
Yes, exactly.
What do you mean?
Well, once we pull them into Node add-on API, we can't necessarily remove them.
Oh, I know. But what I'm saying is, if they start in extras, right?
Sure. Then they can go the other way.
We can move them up eventually if they prove to be useful enough to enough people.
I mean, that'd be go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if you're going to do that, then why is that any different than having, an experimental release of Node add-on API?
Yeah, you mean like sort of like an experimental tier?
Yeah.
Well, except that these things aren't necessarily going to, people don't necessarily want to use experimental, and unless we have like, okay, they'll be promoted after a certain amount of time.
Oh, and another thing, if we do start another package, we're going to need the whole CI infrastructure for that and stuff. So I'm not sure if we even have the muscle to do that, the manpower to do all that. So
yeah, I mean that's more work, another job to watch.
Exactly.
Day break versus other things. What do you do?
Yeah, it's quite a bit of overhead. Yeah.
It's still like, how do we draw the right line? Because we can't take, I mean, I don't think it shouldn't be that there's no modules built on top of Node add-on API, because there still should be cases where that's the right answer.
Yeah. Okay, but like, if we simply don't have the manpower to maintain another module with the infrastructure that we have, right? I mean, maintain it in the way people expect Node modules to be maintained, then we can always say, okay, well, npm publish, go ahead, we've got our blessing. We can look in on it every once in a while, but please maintain it. You know?
Do you think it's useful to try to find some people who use Node add-on API today and involve them in this conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. That would make sense. The more input we can get, the better.
Yeah. So like, for example, these two PRs, right? For async promise and for the async queue, can we ping some people and say, hey, would this be something you might use? Because we have the person who submitted it presumably is using the code, right? But is there anybody else independent of this person who would say like, oh my goodness, I've been looking for this all my life, and can you guys please land this immediately? If we can find such a person, then that's a fairly good reason to land the code.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to ask them, if we land this in add-on API, would you use it? Or if it was, their own module, would you use this, knowing that it wasn't maintained by, the NAPI V team?
Right. The other interesting sort of thing is like, for us to think through versus an experimental flow, like, because the flow we have in core is like, okay, something lands in core, but it's experimental. We then have it bake, and when we're convinced it's good, it'll go out to the APIs. In this case, you could have the flow be, you publish a module, we can tell from the download stats that it's used significantly And then it's like, yeah, okay, it's something that we need to pull into the core of Node add-on API.
Oh, that's a pretty good idea. Yeah, because we don't need to go pinging people. They'll ping npm and we'll know that they've pinged it.
And and we also help to make sure that they're discoverable by updating the main pages and everything to have links to those modules.
Yeah, we could use an npm keyword, and then
right.
we would only have one link, which is a search by npm keyword, and
right.
And it would give a list of modules that provide extra stuff on top of Node add-on API, and we could document that this be the process.
Because in core, one of the tests we kind of sometimes we use is by being in core, does it let you do something that you couldn't do otherwise, or significantly remove maintenance, or and it seems like the wrappers are no brainer in this case, in that they should be in because they basically wrap what we're trying to expose. Any sort of helper functionality you could see is well, is being in core, if there's significant advantage, that would be the other sort of reason that we would pull things in. I'm just trying to think about it when you draw that line. The first line would be, well, if it's a wrapper, yes, or if we can make an argument for why it's better being part of it versus being an external module.
Yeah, and large download numbers on npm are definitely an argument.
Yeah, that shows broad usage, and
I mean that's what happened with Node Report, right? And
right.
with Node Inspector, they started as external packages, right?
Yeah, Node Report was the one where, because it's a native add-on module, compiling across different platforms meant that it was painful for people to get that installed on their own, or need to do it in production where you might not have the compilers and stuff.
Right.
So that's where we solve a problem by being part of the main packaging.
Yeah. I mean,
guess, yeah, in this case, you're inlining stuff. Yeah.
Well, no, not for those reasons, right? But for reasons of having it in one authoritative repository, right? I mean,
right.
the npm package itself is starting to become authoritative when it's getting so many downloads. Right. So then I mean, people may not want to contribute it upstream because they're fine with the way it is, and if the packages gets actively maintained and remains what is that called, vibrant, then it's all good.
But if there's a reason that says, hey, well, it got to the point where we think it's critical for the ecosystem and maintenance is tailing off or something, then you might also say, we'll bring
yeah. So for example, if the core maintainer and the and the one with commit access has other plans all of a sudden, and there's demand for it, then that's a good example for when we might want to fold it in, right?
So I guess, Hitesh, you were thinking that maybe we should try and go out and get input from a few other people. Do you have a thought of who we should go out and reach out to?
Not at the top of my head. I mean, I think it would be interesting, at least in the async promise case, to involve ARC 6011.
Right.
Because I'd have to go and look back at who are the dependent users of Node add-on API.
Right. Okay. Because I think it would be good to say, here's our candidate approach, and then bounce that off those people to get what their feelings are.
Yeah, and I think the authors of the two PRs in question,
because I think we've really got two that we're talking about. One is so maybe we're sort of saying either we are more liberal and we pull things into the core Node add-on API, or we encourage ecosystem modules to be built on top of it and do what we can to make them discoverable and so forth. But sort of encourage that if you have a utility that's not a wrapper, to start there.
Right.
So what do we do about these two PRs now?
I think you have to hold off on them until we form an opinion one way or the other.
I think so. Yeah. that's why I opened this so that we could. I didn't think we just decide, but we need to think about it and come up with and say this is our strategy and why we think it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You know, so here I'm going to take a couple notes from the discussion. Section 2 approaches would be Node add-on API is limited to.
So I think the next steps here are we should probably collaborate on a document expanding on the two options that we have, enumerate the pros and cons, and then identify the add-on API users who we want to involve in this discussion, circulate the doc with them, and then invite them maybe next week or the week after to this call.
Sorry, yeah, I think that's right. I'm just taking a few notes in the issue itself, as you can see.
Yep.
For being in the being.
Sorry, I also need to drop off and go to another meeting, but I'm happy to work on the first draft if you'll want me to.
Sounds great. We'll tag you with that. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Well, see y'all next week.
Yep. See you later.
Next week.
Bye.
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 So I'm just one more thing. Okay, and the other one is we are. Okay, so just put that comment, and then I will say at Hitesh. Is that going to show up?
No, it's Digital Infinity.
Right. Okay. Okay. I'm going to say next steps. I actually want to talk about something regarding. Take a first cut at expanding on the two approaches. I wanted to talk about this because they are collecting Elon and Pokemon visualization that's not in steady state. And I just wanted to raise this. Do we have any plans to implement this correctly for WordPress and for non-for users available? Okay, anything else I should say there in terms of next steps?
All right, sounds about right.
Okay, so I guess at this point we are 5 minutes over. So is there anything else that anybody wants to discuss before we head out for this week?
Oh, I want to post just to repo. It's a curiosity because there are people that are creating binding over an API using Swift and Rust.
Cool.
So, yeah, this is. I posted on the chat. Maybe. Okay, here.
Okay, this is so you can build. Yeah, that's okay.
These are two binding written in Swift and in Rust, and I think that there is interest in an API, especially if you want to write a wrapper in other programming language different from C and C++. It gives you great advantages because you only need to take care of an API and the change in the programming language that you choose.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely interesting. Is the The Rust, well, I guess the Rust one looks a little old, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, it seems very inactive, and the Swift wrapper is on the way. Is a work in progress, and it seems active.
Yeah, it looks new, and that's definitely interesting.
And I'm working on this possibility in Go. So it's an experiment that I'm doing, and when I have a prototype, I will advise you.
Okay,
It's
sounds good.
it's not ideal, but because there are some problems, but I'm trying.
Okay, no, sounds good.
Cool.
Okay, any other things?
No, I think that's it for me, at least.
Okay, well, great. Thanks for everybody for taking the time, and we'll talk to you all next week.
Okay.
All right, talk to you all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Yep, bye.
Ciao.